Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Monday, May 18th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. Today in Riverside, we are looking at a pleasant day with a high of 75.9 degrees and a low of 56.9. It is shaping up to be quite a comfortable day to be outside. Coming up on the program, we are examining the geopolitical situation following a drone strike on a nuclear facility in the United Arab Emirates, and why there are concerns it could reignite regional tensions. We are also taking a close look at the aviation industry to understand why travelers are facing such high airfares since the collapse of Spirit Airlines. We have several other key stories to cover as well, so stay tuned for all of that and more on Alex's News. Good morning. We're following a major development out of the Persian Gulf this morning, where a drone strike on a nuclear power plant has shaken an already fragile ceasefire. To walk us through what happened and what comes next, we're joined by our reporter Ethan. Ethan, good morning. And let's start with the basics. What exactly happened?
Good morning, Grace. So yesterday, Sunday, May 17th, 3 drones entered United Arab Emirates airspace in the early morning hours. According to Al Jazeera and the UAE Ministry of Defense, they approached from the country's western border with Saudi Arabia. UAE air defenses shot down 2 of them, but a third drone slipped through and struck an electrical generator at the Baraka nuclear power plant. That facility is in the Al Dhafra region, and it's the only operational nuclear plant in the Arab world.
A nuclear plant. That's the part that's going to grab everyone's attention. How worried should people be about radiation?
The good news, Grace, is that authorities are saying the facility remains radiologically safe. NPR reported that the UAE's nuclear regulator, known as the Federal Authority for Nuclear Regulation, or FANR, confirmed the fire from the strike was contained by emergency crews. It never reached the reactors or any critical safety infrastructure. That said, the International Atomic Energy Agency noted that the damage to external power equipment forced one reactor, Unit 3, to temporarily rely on emergency diesel generators to keep cooling systems running. So it was a close enough call to get global attention.
And what about the rest of the plant? Is it still up and running?
It is. France 24 and the Emirates Nuclear Energy Company, ENEC, both confirmed that all 4 units at the $20 billion plant are currently operating. There was no impact on radiological safety levels. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi expressed, quote, grave concern, end quote, and warned that military activity targeting nuclear infrastructure is, quote, unacceptable, end quote, and violates international norms. Meanwhile, the UAE regulator says essential systems were never compromised, and radiation levels in Al Dhafra remain normal.
Let's pull back for a second. Most of our listeners may not have been tracking this conflict closely. Remind us how we got here.
Sure. This strike happened in the 11th week of a broader regional war that began on February 28th of this year. According to reporting from the New York Times and ABC News, that conflict was kicked off by a massive U.S. and Israeli campaign against Iranian military and nuclear sites. The American operation was codenamed Operation Epic Fury, and the Israeli campaign was called Operation Roaring Lion. A fragile ceasefire mediated by Pakistan has been in place since April 8th, just over a month ago, but it's been marred by sporadic attacks. Yesterday's strike may have effectively shattered it.
So the UAE is calling this a terrorist attack. Is everyone buying that framing?
Not entirely, and this is one of the more interesting wrinkles. The UAE has called it an, quote, unprovoked terrorist attack, end quote. But independent legal analysts, cited by The Guardian, point out that the UAE's claim to neutrality is contested. The country has been hosting Israeli Iron Dome batteries and personnel, and its ports have been tied to U.S. naval operations involved in a blockade of Iran. Under international law, many scholars now view the UAE as a co-belligerent in the ongoing war, not a bystander.
That's a really important distinction. So who is actually believed to be behind this strike?
No group has officially claimed responsibility, but suspicion has landed hard on Iran-backed militias. NPR and Al Jazeera both noted that a group calling itself the Brigades of the True Promise in the Arabian Peninsula, in Arabic al-Wiyat al-Wad al-Haq, had explicitly threatened the Barakah plant back in March. That group is widely considered a front for Iraqi-based militias like Kataib Hezbollah. Tehran itself has officially denied any involvement, though as we'll discuss, the rhetoric coming out of Iran tells a more complicated story.
You mentioned the drones came from the western border. That seems like a very long flight. Does that path actually make sense?
That's one of the biggest mysteries here, Grace. The UAE Ministry of Defense said the drones came from the western border, which would imply they flew roughly 1,000 kilometers from Iraq through Saudi airspace to reach the plant. But independent military analysis reported by the National and the Institute for the Study of War ISW has raised serious questions about the technical plausibility of that route. Analysts suggest the drones likely exploited a shadow in the regional radar network. Back in early March, Iranian precision strikes destroyed the AN/FPS-132 early warning radar in Qatar and damaged terminals at Al Dhafra Air Base. So the integrated shield was already degraded.
That's fascinating. Are there other theories about where the drones really came from?
Yes, and this is where it gets even more concerning. Given the precision of the strike on a specific electrical generator, some experts believe the drones may have been launched from much closer. One theory points to the empty quarter, the Rub, Al-Khali Desert, as a possible launch site. Another, even more troubling possibility, is a so-called fifth column, an internal cell operating inside the Al Dhafra Desert itself. That would essentially mean the attackers bypassed all the outward-facing defenses by launching from within UAE territory. Either scenario suggests a major intelligence failure.
Let's get to the reaction. How is Washington responding?
The rhetoric is sharp, Grace. On Sunday, President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, "For Iran, the clock is ticking, and they better get moving, fast, or there won't be anything left of them," end quote. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Mike Waltz called the strike a, quote, "blatant violation," end quote, of international law. So the messaging from the White House is essentially that Iran is on notice, and any patience left over from the April ceasefire appears to be evaporating quickly.
And what about Tehran? You said they denied involvement, but there's more to it?
Right. Officially, Iran has denied responsibility, but Mohsen Rezai, a military advisor to the supreme leader, publicly said that Iranian, quote, "fingers are on the trigger," end quote. NPR also reported something striking from Iranian state television. News presenters appeared on air armed with rifles, and one of them mimed, taking a shot at the UAE flag. So the denial from Tehran is, let's say, not exactly accompanied by de-escalatory body language.
How is the UAE itself framing the path forward?
Presidential advisor Anwar Gargash called the strike a, quote, "dangerous escalation," end quote, and a, quote, "dark development," end quote. UAE Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan has been holding urgent calls with regional allies. He's asserted the UAE's, quote, "sovereign, legal, and military right," end quote, to respond. So they're laying the diplomatic and legal groundwork for retaliation, even though no strikes have been announced yet. Military officials from the U.S., Israel, and the UAE are scheduled to meet tomorrow, Tuesday, May 19th, to discuss a formal response.
And I understand Saudi Arabia had its own incident the same day?
That's right. Saudi Arabia reported intercepting 3 separate drones coming from Iraq on the same day as the Barakah strike. The Saudis have joined the UAE in condemning the attack as a threat to regional stability. So we're seeing a coordinated Gulf response forming. And it's increasingly clear that whoever launched these drones was targeting multiple countries, not just one site.
Before we wrap up, help us understand why Barakah specifically matters so much, beyond just being a nuclear plant.
It's really a symbol, Grace. Barakah was built with South Korean assistance through the firm KEPCO, and it provides roughly 25% of the UAE's electricity. Under what's known as the 123 agreement with the United States, the UAE agreed to forego domestic uranium enrichment. That made the plant the gold standard for peaceful nuclear energy in the region. So attacking Barakah isn't just a military act. It's a direct threat to the UAE's economic future and to the entire model of non-proliferation cooperation the Gulf has been building.
So as of this morning, where do things stand?
As of today, May 18th, no retaliatory strikes have been announced. But that tripartite meeting tomorrow between U.S., Israeli, and Emirati military officials will likely determine whether the April 8th ceasefire holds in any form or collapses entirely. Given the rhetoric from President Trump and from Tehran, and the unresolved questions about how those drones actually reached Baraka, the region really is sitting on a knife's edge. The next 48 hours could reshape this conflict.
Sobering reporting. Ethan, thank you so much for breaking all of that down for us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Grace.
And for our second story this morning, the American skies look very different than they did just 2 weeks ago. Spirit Airlines, the longtime king of cheap fares, is officially gone, and travelers are already feeling the pinch heading into summer. Our aviation reporter Chloe is here with the full picture. Chloe, good morning.
Good morning, Grace. Yes, this is really a seismic moment for American air travel. Spirit shut down in the middle of the night on May 2nd, just over 2 weeks ago, with that final flight from Detroit touching down at Dallas-Fort Worth just after midnight. According to reporting from KES5, Yahoo Travel, and the Associated Press, the 34-year-old pioneer of ultra-low-cost flying is finished. And the timing could not be worse, with Memorial Day just around the corner.
Wow, the middle of the night. What did Spirit's leadership say as the doors were closing?
There was actually a pretty emotional moment in a Manhattan bankruptcy court. Spirit's lawyer, Marshall Hubner, apologized to what he called the millions of price-conscious Americans who may now be, quote, priced entirely out of air travel, end quote. Yahoo Travel and KES5 both noted he thanked the passengers who had sustained the airline since its founding. By May 3rd, just over 2 weeks ago now, the airline's demise was complete, and a federal judge authorized the rapid liquidation of its fleet 2 days later.
And just how big was that fleet they're liquidating?
We're talking about 114 Airbus A320 family aircraft all heading to auction. Industry analysts cited by Marketplace and Going point out that this is the first major U.S. airline failure in 25 years, going back to carriers like Independence Air in 2006. So this is not a routine bankruptcy reorganization. This is a full exit, and roughly 50,000 passengers were left stranded in the immediate chaos.
Okay, so how does a major airline collapse this quickly? What pushed Spirit over the edge?
It really comes down to one word, Grace, and that's fuel. The Guardian and AP News both point to the war that broke out on February 28th between a U.S.-Israel coalition and Iran. That conflict led to a de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which normally carries about 20% of the world's oil. Once that artery shut down, jet fuel prices exploded, and Spirit's razor-thin margins simply could not absorb the shock.
Can you put some numbers on that fuel spike for us?
Absolutely. Jet fuel went from about $2.50 per gallon to over $4.50 per gallon. That's somewhere between an 80 and 120% jump in just a matter of weeks. A U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports started on April 13th, and combined with Iranian mining of the waterway, tanker traffic collapsed by 90%. Legacy carriers like Delta, United, and American could lean on premium cabins and corporate loyalty programs to cushion the blow. Spirit had no such cushion.
And the situation in the Gulf isn't getting better, is it?
No, in fact, it got worse just yesterday. AP News reported a drone strike on May 17th targeting the United Arab Emirates' Baraka nuclear power plant. The strike caused a fire, but thankfully there was no radiological release. Still, it was described as a, quote, dangerous escalation, end quote, and oil prices jumped again. President Donald Trump warned Tehran that, quote, the clock is ticking, end quote.
Let's bring it home for travelers. How much more are people paying right now?
NBC and Fox News are reporting that average domestic airfares are already up 15 to 20% year over year. But here's the part that really stings, Grace. On routes Spirit used to dominate, there was something analysts call the Spirit effect, where a budget carrier's mere presence forced legacy airlines to lower their own fares. That pressure is gone now, Analysts from PointsPath and Dollar Flight Club project fares on those specific routes will climb 20 to 25% this summer.
Are there particular cities getting hit hardest?
Yes, and the volatility is extreme in a few places. Atlantic City is probably the worst case, where Spirit accounted for 75% of all service. Travelers there are facing a near-total lack of budget options. Fort Lauderdale, which was Spirit's largest hub at 29% of capacity, saw what's being called panic pricing, with some fares spiking as much as 218% in the 48 hours after the shutdown.
218%. That's almost unbelievable.
It really is, and that's not even the full list. Orlando and Detroit are seeing last-minute fares roughly double as the remaining carriers capture all of that displaced demand. The Points Guy is now telling summer travelers to book 35 to 45 days in advance because the last-minute deal has effectively disappeared for the entire 2026 season. If you're used to grabbing a cheap weekend flight a few days out, those days are over for now.
So what's happening with the other budget carriers? Are they stepping up?
They are scrambling to fill the void. Frontier Airlines has designated Detroit, Las Vegas, Orlando, and Fort Lauderdale as focus cities to backfill Spirit's lost capacity. JetBlue has expanded 12 routes out of Fort Lauderdale to compete for Spirit's former Northeast and Caribbean passengers. And Southwest and Breeze Airways are aggressively grabbing gates in Orlando to pick up those former Spirit connections to Philadelphia and Atlantic City. So there's movement, but it will take months for capacity to rebuild.
And there's been a major merger in the budget space too, right?
That's right. On May 13th, just 5 days ago, Allegiant Air finalized its $1.5 billion acquisition of Sun Country Airlines. That deal creates the 8th largest airline in the country. According to Simple Flying, the merger gives them what's called defensive scale against fuel costs, but the downside is that we now have fewer independent budget competitors in the market. Less competition almost always means higher fares over time.
Could the federal government have stopped Spirit's collapse?
That's the big question, Grace. On the very day Spirit stopped flying, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy rejected a $2.5 billion emergency aid request from the Association of Value Airlines, also known as AVA. ABC News and The Guardian report that Duffy argued carriers should look to private capital first, and that the Department of Transportation didn't have unilateral authority for that kind of bailout, so the federal lifeline simply wasn't there.
Was there lobbying behind that decision?
Quite a bit, actually. Airlines for America, the trade group that represents legacy carriers like Delta and United, lobbied heavily against the bailout. Their argument was that a targeted rescue of budget airlines would create what they called an unfair advantage. Critics, of course, say the result is exactly what those legacy carriers wanted, which is less competition and more pricing power going into the busiest travel season of the year.
Speaking of pricing power, what does this mean for basic economy fares going forward?
This is where everyday flyers are really going to notice changes. CBS News reported that as of today, May 18th, American Airlines has officially begun charging basic economy passengers for seat selection. United Airlines is reportedly moving toward a model where even carry-on allowances and seat selection become optional add-ons. They're trying to offset a projected $11 billion industry-wide increase in fuel expenses. So the base ticket may look similar, but the extras are going to add up fast.
How long should travelers expect this pain to last?
Unfortunately, the outlook is not great. As long as the war in the Middle East continues, energy costs are going to stay elevated. Industry forecasters expect airfares to remain at decade-high levels through the middle of 2027, so this isn't a one-summer problem. The advice from experts is plan early, book in advance, and brace yourself for those new fees on what used to be free.
A truly stunning shift in American air travel in just over 2 weeks. Chloe, thank you so much for walking us through all of it this morning.
My pleasure, Grace. We'll keep tracking it.
That's Chloe, with our look at the fallout from the Spirit Airlines collapse. We'll be right back after this. Here are some other headlines. The World Health Organization is sounding a viral alarm today as Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus has declared the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda a public health emergency of international concern. This situation is particularly feverish because authorities are battling the rare Bundibugyo strain, which Health Minister Samuel Roger Kamba reports has already resulted in approximately 350 suspected cases and 91 probable deaths. Health officials are sick with worry because, unlike other strains, there are currently no licensed vaccines or specific treatments available, making this a truly fluid crisis. While the WHO is not yet calling for travel restrictions, the high mobility in cities like Kampala and Goma means the risk of a regional breakout is spreading fast. This declaration is intended to inject more funding into a response that currently relies on the strained resources of local health systems. In Oakland, California, a 9-person jury is beginning to process a lot of data as deliberations start in the high-profile legal battle between Elon Musk and OpenAI. Musk is trying to prove that CEO Sam Altman and President Greg Brockman had a lapse in intelligence when they allegedly breached a founding agreement to turn their nonprofit into a for-profit giant for Microsoft. The tech mogul is looking for a payout of roughly $150 billion and wants the leadership team to be given the boot. OpenAI's lawyers argue Musk is simply a sore loser, but if Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers doesn't dismiss the case over statute of limitations issues, the verdict could derail a planned $1 trillion initial public offering. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche is among those watching to see if the jury finds that the defendants really did steal a charity. On the trade front, the White House is beefing up the American economy after China committed to purchasing at least $17 billion in agricultural products annually through 2028. Following a summit between Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, it seems both nations are so glad to reach an agreement that includes beef, poultry, pork, and dairy. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer noted the creation of a new board of trade to help manage the relationship and steer both countries toward mutual tariff reductions. This deal provides a much-needed lifeline for farmers as China prepares to lift suspensions on over 400 beef facilities. In New York, the commute has gone completely off the rails as service on the Long Island Railroad remains suspended. A strike by 3,500 workers has entered its first full work week, leaving 300,000 daily riders looking for a new track. Governor Kathy Hochul and MTA Chairman John O'Lieber have urged people to stay home as the 275 shuttle buses available are simply not enough to carry the load. Negotiations with the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen hit a snag over wage increases and healthcare premiums in the first walkout for the line in 32 years. While Mayor Zohran Mamdani is calling for patience, officials warn it will take at least 24 hours to restore service once a deal is reached. Finally, it appears Senator Bill Cassidy has reached the end of the line in Louisiana. During Saturday's Republican primary, the incumbent was cast aside, failing to qualify for the upcoming runoff. Trump-endorsed Julia Letlow took the lead with 45% of the vote, while John Fleming secured 28%, leaving Cassidy in third place with 24%. President Trump celebrated the result as a successful retribution campaign following Cassidy's previous impeachment vote. The state will now prepare for a runoff on June 27 to decide who will fill the seat. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.